So welcome to this second Zoom college forum. We should, if things were normal, which of course they have not been for some time, we should have been having our college social tomorrow. I'm really sorry that we're not able to do that. I put on my best shirt for the occasion to try and recreate some of the atmosphere. The first thing I wanted to say to everybody is just to reiterate a point that I've tried to make throughout the pandemic, that we have really achieved a huge amount over the last few months. If you had told me in February that by the summer we would have moved all of our courses online, we would have graduated all of our students without holding any in-person examinations, I would have thought that that was a laughable prospect. I would have said it would have been impossible. But in fact, through the hard work and effort and ingenuity of everybody in the college, we have achieved that.
I want to talk to the board, and I worry you.
Just muting everybody apart from me there, sorry, so that you can only hear me. It's been a huge effort by everybody and something for which I'm hugely grateful. I wish that we had a much clearer idea at this stage of what's going to happen moving forward. Unfortunately, you don't need me to tell you that we still have lots of unknowns. The two biggest unknowns for us, the first is whether COVID is over the worst and we're now on our way to the sunlit uplands, or whether we've got a second wave coming. I mean, if you were asking me to make a bet, I'd say we have a second wave coming. And then the other question is, and it's not unrelated, will our international students show up? And of course, if a significant group of our international students do not show up, that will create a very severe financial position for the university and the college, to which we'll have to react. So insofar as we don't know about those two things, we have had to proceed with a degree of caution and leave some things open. We've tried not to give everybody false certainty, saying that things will happen that we don't know whether they will happen. On the other hand, we have tried to be clear as clear as possible about what we think will happen next year and to tie things down where we can. So what we are saying is, first of all, we will be back next term on campus if we can possibly be. And Lorraine's going to talk a little bit about how we're going to make that happen. That coming back onto campus will include one on-campus taught activity per module being offered each week, if at all possible. But at the same time, we will be delivering all lecture material online, at least through semester one. I know some other universities have not nailed this down yet and are telling their staff to prepare for either online or on campus. We're saying lecture material definitely online. The only thing that will happen on campus for our students is one scheduled activity per week, per module. And even there, of course, we will have to offer an online option for those students who are unable to come online. Some people have been asking us for more guidance around this, and it's really hard in this still changing and uncertain situation to give clear guidance, and so we have resisted doing that. But I think the important thing is to focus on some principles which will guide our priorities. And if I were to pick out three key principles, one is that we should deliver the best student experience we possibly can, seize opportunities and be positive about what we can achieve over the coming year, because there are lots of opportunities, I think. Related to that is the point that online education is not per se a less good thing than on-campus education. Online education can be really good, and we're going to make it as good as we possibly can make it. And then the third thing is that the campus must be and will be safe for all of our staff and students. Recognizing that many people will face challenges in the coming year, we should deal with those challenges with care and patience. Now, one more little thing from me before I pass over to, first of all, Catherine to talk about, well, mainly about resilient education and what it's going to look like next year, but also the NSS. We realise that one of the things that many people are concerned about is travelling to work in the coming year, particularly those of us who use public transport. So after College Assembly today, I will be sending out a transport survey. It's a really simple survey, but it's trying to get a handle on how we all travelled to work before COVID and what at the moment we all think that we will be doing in the autumn. And the idea of that is to help the transport people centrally in the university to work out what kinds of measures we could take now that will make that all better for everybody. So I'd be very grateful if you could fill that survey in. I've done it myself. It took me a minute, so it's not a big demand on your time, and it will give us a much clearer steer on what we need to do. So that's it from me. What comes next is that, and apologies for all of the traffic noise outside. Traffic is definitely back up and running outside my flat. So what's going to happen next is, first of all, Catherine's going to talk about resilient education in the NSS, then we'll pass over to Lorraine on the return to campus, and finally Deborah Youdell, who takes over as the head of School of Education in August, is going to talk about some of the work that the School of Education has been doing with Birmingham City Council and Birmingham schools in the context of the pandemic. We hear a lot about what has been happening in our medical school, trying to directly tackle the pandemic, but there's some hugely exciting work going on in CODS as well, and we've just randomly picked one of those to hear about. There's lots of other interesting things happening too, but we thought to hear a bit about what we're doing with our local school kids would be a really valuable thing. Certainly, I think for many of us, for me included, what's happening to our kids around school has been one of the big challenges of the pandemic. Trying to work and have a 12-year-old coming in and out of the kitchen while I'm talking is not the easiest thing, but he seems to have got his drink and disappeared again. So with no more ado, I'm going to pass over to Catherine. And can I say that if you have questions at any stage, just start typing them in the chat, and I will try and work out a way to deal with them. So Catherine, are you able to unmute yourself, or do I need to unmute you?
I think I am unmuted.
Fabulous. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you. So I just wanted to start off really saying some thank yous to all of you for getting us to where we are. As Richard said, we have achieved a huge amount in a fairly short space of time, and we've also maintained, a good student experience. So I think we all need to, congratulate ourselves for doing that and for, succeeding in what's been a really challenging time for all of us. And I particularly like to pick out those colleagues who managed the exam boards. That was a huge effort, and thank you so much for everybody for that. I heard this morning that we've got some really excellent and positive feedback from the external examiners saying that, we're doing much better than their own institutions. So I think that's a real testament to, what we managed to do together. So, really thank you for that. Thank you as well for colleagues who have, basically redesigned our curriculum, in a couple of months, and managed to ensure that that is a resilient curriculum that we can deliver sort of, whatever happens next year. So that's a fantastic achievement. And also thank you to all of those colleagues who have given up their time to run webinars for us on, what bimodal teaching might look like, how to present yourself online, how to use Zoom, how to use Canvas. That's a fantastic resource there that we've got for the future. So thank you for all of you for doing that. I just wanted to sort of say a few things about the next couple of months. I think Lorraine is going to pick up on timetabling, so I won't say much about that. But I guess over the next few months, we're going to be designing the bimodal versions of modules. And basically at its heart, what we're trying to do with bimodal is really offer agility. So as Richard said, we don't know what next year is going to look like. We know we've got social distancing. Anyone that's been onto campus knows it looks very different from normal, and it will be different both for us and for students. We're going to have, testing, track and tracing. We're going to have enhanced cleaning routines in all of our buildings. We've got, seats being taken out of the lecture theatres. We may have a local lockdown. So we just know it's going to be a very disrupted experience, both for students and for us, because we'll have to get used to teaching, in a very different way. So the aim of bimodal approach, helps us to respond to that by making sure that we've got, all of our lecture material recorded in advance. So, colleagues will be doing that over the summer. We will have online versions of seminars and small group teaching as an alternative to face-to-face on campus teaching. And we're going to be running our personal academic tutoring, online. So that does give us a lot of flexibility and agility. And as Richard said, the ambition that we're working on at the minute is that all students will be able to have at least 1 hour on campus per 20 credit module. Now, we might be able to fit more than that onto campus, but that is our starting point. So when we're working on designing the timetable, that is the sort of the baseline. That is what we are intending to offer every single student. If we can do that, we will then go back and make sure that we can add more and more into the timetable. But working on 1 metre plus in terms of the capacity of the campus, we think we should be able to offer that at the very least. Any material that academics would normally have provided in a sort of lecture form, as I say, that needs to be pre-recorded, but that doesn't mean just recording yourself speaking for an hour. In some cases that might work, but what we really need to do is ensure that students are engaging with that, and it's sort of chunked up into bite-size, little amounts for students to be able to digest. So there's a huge amount of support from the HEFI material. Everybody will be enrolled onto the HEFI Canvas course, and that's got all of the advice, ideas, all of the COS webinars on there. You'll obviously know what works best for your modules, but the kind of things we're looking at are discussion forums, quizzes, including videos, snippets. So that's the kind of thing that we're encouraging academics to look at when they're designing that asynchronous material that students can watch whenever they want. HEF, you've also provided a list of the recommended tools that you can use for delivery, because some work better than others for different things. So again, that's worth looking at. So that's a sort of asynchronous delivery, and then what that's supported by synchronous seminar group work that will either be face-to-face on campus as normal, or we're going to have to deliver that online. As Richard said, there will always need to be an online alternative for those students who may not be able to travel to the campus, and also for some of our staff who may not be able to come to campus and they will want to deliver that remotely. So we really hope that as many seminars as we can possibly manage will be delivered on campus, but we are very aware of the limits to the capacity. And I think what's really important for us all to remember is that at the heart of this, we have to retain the student experience. So, we're not expecting any of our online material to be, sort of Netflix standard, but we do need to think about, what are we trying to achieve through this? What are the learning outcomes that we want those students to have? What is the best approach for achieving that? So when you're looking at, the numbers that you might be having in groups, the way that you want to interact with students, use the materials that we've got, the advice around the pedagogy, just to think about what am I trying to achieve and what is the best way to do that. And for professional service colleagues, HEFI are going to run a couple of seminars so that you can understand and get to grips with the kind of thing that's being done through the bimodal teaching. There's going to be a general awareness session for all staff around Canvas and the new Canvas template, which will ensure consistency across all of our modules. And then they're going to offer specific training around module readiness for September, so look out for that. The other thing in terms of student experience is that we do have a lot of potential software that we could use. People perhaps have used things in the past that a bit more whizzy than perhaps the things that we're offering. But just bear in mind that students can't always access that. They might not know how to use them. So I think we want to keep it sort of simple for students, but make it good. And we have some, great expertise across the college in doing this. We already deliver distance learning, really well. We've got fantastic blended programs. So we've got a lot of expertise. So draw on that from your colleagues. And I think we will be able to do, something that is a really good offer for our students, despite the fact that things will be disrupted next year. And we will have control over the timetable this year. So I think Lorraine is going to talk a bit more about that. But that's sort of managing who goes where and at what time, that's been devolved to the college. And we're going to be working that out over the summer. We're getting together a college timetabling team and school timetabling team. So we're going to be working on that over the summer. So we do have control over how we use the space that we're allocated. So just finally on NSS, I think, well, certainly for me, last week, given the challenges that we'd experienced throughout the year, I think there was a bit of a sort of collective sigh of relief that actually our scores in the main were fairly good. And some areas had done, really very well, notably education that had, really fantastic overall satisfaction, and the business school programs that had, demonstrated improvements across the board, really, again, in a very challenging year. However, there are still some sort of stubborn areas where we are not making progress and where we are losing ground compared with our Russell Group competitors and the more sort of teaching focused universities. And that's particularly around assessment and feedback, organisation and management, and student voice. And that is something that is happening across the board within the university. So we will be looking at having an institutional response and some institutional initiatives to look at how we can make progress on our organisation and management and student voice scores, because they're dragging down our schools, really. The other area where we have not done well, and this is an enduring issue, is that our BAME students have lower satisfaction overall across all programmes within the college and the university. So we're going to be working with Professor Kawant Bhopal to ensure that the actions that set out in the BAME awarding gap action plan also address some of the issues that are raised by the NSS scores. I think I'll end there, Richard. I hope that covers what everybody wanted to know. I can't see the questions, so I look forward to them.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. The two questions that have come in so far are not, I think, directly aimed at you. So what I'd suggest is that we move on to Lorraine, and then that I sweep up with questions. There is a question actually for you, Catherine. Do we get NSS data broken down by groups, e.g. BAME?
Yes, so on Tableau, it's all broken down. There's lots of different ways of cutting the data. If people don't have access to Tableau, I suggest getting it, because there's a huge amount of resource on there. And all of your heads of education have got the link to the Tableau site where all the NSS data is. So yes, you can play with it and mix it around. Okay,
that's great. Thank you. Let's move on to Lorraine. Lorraine, you are unmuted, I think.
I'm unmuted. Thank you, Richard. So yeah, my areas that I want to talk about are the timetabling, and then a combined area of bubbles and the practicalities of returning to campus. But like Catherine, I think I need to start, just in case I run out of time, with a massive thanks. Catherine's already thanked the education teams that have progressed and graduated our students. But I also want to add that to that thanks, and also in preparation for the timetabling, I want to thank all of the volunteers that are going to be working on the timetabling project between now and the start of term. And then finally, a huge thanks to Paul, leading our facilities team, with Rita, Trudy, Richard and Joe, who've just been working so hard to try to expedite the return to campus and to try to allow people to collect items that they've needed from campus in very difficult circumstances, which I'll get on to. And a final thank you for everybody who's been using their best endeavours to continue to work successfully from home during this really tricky time. So I'll start with the return to campus and bubbles. And when we're talking about bubbles, Catherine's already alluded to it in the education resilience framework, in that our academics are looking at delivering modules in teams to ensure that if somebody does become unwell, then the module can continue to be delivered. In a similar way, we've got to think about this in terms of everything we do. When we do return to campus, how do we organise our teams to make sure that we are not all together in one team back in the same space? So our heads of operations in each school are sorting out each team and how they might return to campus in their bubble and stay in their bubble. And we're making sure that people don't put themselves in a position where they're working closely with other people that may actually have to cover their work if they become ill. I want to just mention the staff survey. So it's a long time ago now, or it feels like a long time ago. We all filled out a staff survey, or over 60% of us in COS filled out the staff survey. And one of the things that came up was quite a difficult score on the university cares about my well-being. I would hope that if that survey was done now, that I would hope that most people would think that the university really does care about our well-being, because I think they've been excellent in ensuring that people with responsibilities have been able to fulfill their personal responsibilities and blend that with their work life. The other area where we got a lot of free text comments was flexibility. And again, I think if we were to be asking people the same questions now on their flexible working, we've really done amazingly well on flexible working. And that's something that we need to hang on to, both for return to campus for resilience and ensuring that if there is an outbreak on campus, that we're flexible enough to work back at home again. But also, we don't want to drift back into the same ways of working that we were working in. We've learned so much through this last 4 months that we need to continue to work flexibly and prepare to have a permanent arrangement where people can work flexibly. That's not to say that everybody's going to be working at home forever. And it's certainly not to say that we won't expect people back on campus and offer people the opportunity to be back on campus. But I'm sure we'll be doing a lot more at home in the future. So you'll have seen an email come out from Richard and myself this morning about return to campus. And from the 3rd of August, you won't need permission, i.e. a letter from me, to return to campus. Please do not read that as you can return to campus from the 3rd of August, because your buildings will not be open. We're working really hard to get those buildings open, and we're a long way down the road with both University House, or part of it, and Alan Walter's building. But we may not be opening in the same way that we left them. So even though you may think, okay, I worked in Alan Walter's when I left, I'm going to go back to work on the 3rd of August. You might find that your space is being used by somebody else who needs to be working on campus. So ensure that you have conversations with your line manager about the return to campus. We get most of our buildings back to us on the 7th of August, but that doesn't mean that they will be opened on the 7th of August. After we get them back, we have a lot to organise. We have risk assessments to carry out. And we have to get those risk assessments agreed by our unions and safety services. So we have a lot of iterations of the risk assessments. And in that risk assessment, we will be working through the signage, which we've got to then deliver onto campus. We will either be removing furniture to make sure that we're all naturally socially distanced, or we'll be taping up areas if we can't remove all furniture. We'll have one-way systems in place. We will have cleaning regimes, new cleaning regimes. If needed, we'll be putting screens up, and then we'll have lots of rules about shared space, kitchen space, toilet space, etc. So all of that's got to be worked through, which is why on the 7th of August we won't be reopening all of our buildings for general access. However, it will give us a lot more flexibility to get into the buildings, to retrieve items for the click and collect service that we've been providing. So that brings me on to the medium term. From September the 11th, we would hope that we'll have a vibrant campus, and that's what the Vice-Chancellor wants. However, with our replanning of space, it's likely that we will still have a mixed mode. So many people will be working from home in half their week, and many people that will then be working on campus. Some people will be very nervous about returning to campus, and we'll be holding those conversations with them. We'll try to provide some opportunities for them to come and have a look at what we've physically done on campus, and we'll be filming. Paul will be filming a video walking through some of the spaces on campus so that you can have a look from home about what we are doing to prepare for return. So there's lots of thoughts and lots of plans happening at the moment. In open plan offices, it's likely that if an office had 8 people in it, that we will only be able to have 3 or 4 people at a time, and we'll have to rotate those spaces. And people will be responsible for cleaning their space down when they arrive and when they leave. And it's likely that they will know who they're sharing that workspace with. It won't be hot desking, because we're obviously not advocating hot desking, but on a separate day, somebody else might have to use the same workspace. Not just because some people may have taken all of their IT equipment home and we might not have the IT equipment back on campus. It may be that we look at people's single offices and arrange that 2 people will use that office, one in the first half of the week and one in the second half of the week. We're working through all of these options right now for each building as we get them back, and as we get access and a project manager from our estates team to work through those principles. And we'll be talking to teams as we arrange those return to work activities. We'll be talking to teams. Heads of operations have already started to hold those conversations. So I can see this as being a very positive situation for us in terms of implementing flexible working and an agile workspace, which we've been talking about for an awful long time. And we haven't been able to implement it at the speed we've wanted to. So very much as Richard said, we've done amazing things with the education framework. We can also do amazing things now with the way that we work. We've found that staff have worked so incredibly well at home, often working on projects that they wouldn't have normally worked on, working much harder, in fact, and longer hours, which is not always a good thing, but they've been inspired by their different working arrangements. So the key points then is that work with your line managers to understand your pattern of return to work. You'll be taking some personal responsibility for any shared space. We will, even if you can do all of your job at home forevermore, we would not want you not to have some access to campus, and we will make sure that everybody does get some access to campus and some time on campus to reconnect with your colleagues and some social space as well, social time. We will be balancing our business needs with the flexibility needs. So you may be very nervous about returning back and have caring responsibilities. We will be doing our best to accommodate all of those issues. But if the business needs were that you could only do your job from campus, ultimately, that's the way that we'll have to manage that return to work. We've worked through, still working through a lot of the long-term issues. So how do we make meetings work when we've got mixed modes, mixed attendance, the track and trace, how are we going to manage that? We've got the CERT, the senior team working on that and planning for various scenarios should a second wave occur. And then of course we've got the bringing the students back safely to campus and how we, with the increased numbers on campus, how we get into and out of our buildings. I've been also asked about face coverings. We are advising the use of face coverings inside buildings, not outside. And of course, we'll be responding to any government guidelines that we have on face coverings. I'm sure our students will feel very comfortable if staff and students are wearing face coverings inside the buildings. And if we're working on 1 metre plus, then we will be working with face coverings. So it may be that local areas we are insisting on you wearing face coverings if we're 1 metre plus. Final message on return to work then, and Bubbles, is that although you won't need that letter from me from the 3rd of August, please don't come back to campus until you've talked to your line manager to ensure that your space is ready for you.
Lorraine, we are, do you have a lot more to do? Because we're just aware of the time.
Okay, fair enough. Very quickly on timetabling then. Catherine's covered most of the points that I was going to cover, but it's through no fault of any one area that we've ended up having to locally timetable our space. As soon as we know what space that is that we're going to be given, we'll let you know. And again, thank you to the teams that are going to be locally timetabling the space. Iola is going to project manage this, and we've already had a lot of volunteers from all areas, and thank you for that. I'll leave it there, and then I'll answer any questions that need answering on timetabling.
Thank you, Lorraine, and thank you to everybody who's been putting in questions. There's been a little flurry of questions during that presentation, as you might imagine. Just a few things to pick out. One person has asked, as Sarah has asked, is the Muirhead Tower of particular concern? If we're based in the Muirhead Tower, will it take longer to return than in other buildings? To be honest, we were a bit concerned about Muirhead originally, but Paul and I had a walk through last week, and I'm reasonably confident that we will be able to open Muirhead in a similar kind of fashion to the other buildings, and that we will work out a way of social distancing. The pinch points in the Muirhead Tower are going to be going up and down the stairwells. We'll have a one-way system. We'll have limits on how many people can be in the lift at one time, and that's going to be a constraint. So if you work on one of the higher floors of the Muirhead Tower, you need to bear that in mind, that there will almost inevitably be queues for the lift, and if you don't need to use the lift, please don't. There's a question came from Rose about at what point can we just come back onto campus, never mind going in the buildings, and the answer to that is the 3rd of August. From the 3rd of August, the ticker tape and the security and so on will come down, and members of the public, as I understand it, will be able to walk through campus. Although, as Lorraine says, our buildings will mostly not be open at that stage, so you won't be able to get into our buildings, or indeed actually any buildings, because you need to have permission to go into. Well, you should only be going into buildings if you work in those buildings. Quite a few questions about people who are anxious about coming back onto campus, who have disabilities. It might be amongst BAME staff, or for another reason feel that they are particularly vulnerable to the virus. I think the answer here is several elements of the answer. One is we will only reopen the buildings when they are safe for everybody to come back. That's the first thing. So we're not asking anybody to come back to an unsafe environment. And we are absolutely looking at accessibility for people with disabilities as part of the opening up the buildings. So priority, for example, in the lifts for disabled staff. We will be trying to accommodate wherever possible people who do not feel safe to come back onto campus. We can't guarantee that we will be able to accommodate everybody. And this will, to a very real extent, need to be worked out at local level within teams. And so that's my point about encouraging everybody to work with everybody else with patience and care, so that we can work all of this out. We will have a number of people who will not want to come back or will not be able to come back at certain times. And if we can accommodate that, we will try to do it. Somebody has said they're living in Leicester, and obviously, of course, at the moment, if you're living in Leicester, you're not coming in. And one of the points about bimodal education in the first place is and trying to limit the amount of work we do on campus is that we know that some people will find themselves in a position where they cannot come in, either because they're in a local lockdown or indeed because they have been contacted by Test and Trace and have been told to self-isolate, and we have to accommodate that. Lorraine did mention taping and screens. We are trying to use these as an absolute minimum. I'm very keen that our buildings do not look like they have been shut up with ticker tape. You know, I've pointed out nobody's died, nothing's been stolen, nothing is broken. We should try and make the campus look as welcoming as possible. And screens, we will have screens in 1 or 2 pinch point areas, but screens are quite a lot of problem, and we would much rather organise things in a way that we don't need to use screens. So I'm going to stop there. I don't think there's anything else from the questions so far, but I will have another look through. But I want to turn to Deborah now. Deborah, you've been leading an initiative with Birmingham City Council to look at the experience of schools around COVID. So it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Hello, thank you. It's lovely to see everybody here. So this initiative started back at the beginning of the shutdown. Colleagues in the School of Education were discussing the education implications, of course. And so we contacted Tim O'Neill, the Director of Children's Services at BCC, really with an offer, and said to him, here we are obviously dealing with this ourselves for our own students, but if there are things that we can usefully do with you to support education in the city, then we will do our best to do that. And of course, the City Council welcomed that. And so we've gone from there. We've called it the Birmingham Education and COVID-19 Initiative. It's some of its research, some of its consultation and support. And because of the nature of the situation, it's obviously had to be really flexible and responsive. So what we've been doing with the city has changed over time and still is changing. It's been an absolute collaborative partnership piece of work in terms of colleagues in the School of Education. I can't name check them because there's such a large number of colleagues in the school who've contributed, and given the pressures, and you know, people have been ill, and the pressures of everything else they're doing, what we've found is that lots of people doing a little bit can achieve a lot. So we have, and we've had great support from Lizzie Kirsch and Helen Acker, who've helped to direct us and steer us in relation to some of the work that we've done. So we've done a survey of parents and carers in Birmingham, which we sent out when schools were still closed, and that's proved really interesting. I haven't got time to tell you all the findings from that as we're analysing, but unsurprisingly, I guess, it's a very, very mixed picture, and it's a picture that demonstrates the implications of a range of forms of disadvantage, as well as the implications of trying to homeschool children, more privileged families, but where 2 parents are in the house working and trying to work. So being quite well off and being furloughed seemed to be ideal for parents. It's what's been really striking is around half of the parents in the city who replied said they weren't confident about supporting their children, and I think that's really striking finding, and underscores the need for schools to support parents in supporting children. We've just sent in a School of Education submission to the Education Committee inquiry, where we've gone through in some detail the issues that have arisen while we've been working with the city this summer. And I think one of the things that's maybe of particular interest to us as a college, one of the things that we've said to the Education Committee is that there's a real need for mid-tier coordination and leadership, and that actually what some of the problems that have emerged because of the call it diversity, call it fragmentation of school provision, without a without an umbrella organisation with some responsibility and empowered to do that coordination and support. So that's one of the things that we've suggested. We've also suggested, and we talked at length, the group, there's again a large group of people from the school, as well as a couple of colleagues from elsewhere in the university contributing. We talked at length about what we would recommend to the committee in relation to digital provision. And what would be the right thing to say. And what we've said to the committee is that we think that it's now quite clear that digital hardware and broadband access are part of the education infrastructure, and as such shouldn't be being treated anymore as a private good which people may or may not have as private individuals. But you know, there are significant implications of making that claim. We've made that claim as well in the context of really stressing, goes to what Catherine was saying, IT is a tool, and it needs to be embedded in really good quality, thoughtful pedagogy. So we've also talked about what that means in terms of teacher education, initial and ongoing teacher education, to ensure that people have the skills and confidence to use information technology as part of a rich pedagogy, not as a kind of content-driven, individualising, isolated sort of experience that it can be. This summer, we're continuing with this work in Birmingham. Javeria Naseem is doing interviews with families over the summer. In particular, we're looking at those groups of the Birmingham community who've been particularly badly affected. So we're targeting Asian communities in particular, and groups who've been particularly affected by COVID, and who've said in the survey that they found supporting learning at home particularly difficult. So that's what Javeria is doing. Carl Kitchen and Ian Magincy are working with the city to do some work with children to look at children's experiences and their well-being and think about what that means for moving forward. Colin Diamond's been working with the city around summer provision, so we're dovetailing those things together. And we hope that some of our students will be able to volunteer for summer provision in the city. So I think the last thing really I would like to say is that it's been a crazy time and so much pressure for people. And I think that what this piece of work has done is really show us what we can offer and what we can achieve as a collective where we work with lots of people's small contribution can amass to so much. And I think that we can, I really hope that we will be able to carry on doing this with the city over the summer and then into the new academic year. It's obviously an evolving situation. The city's going to keep wanting us to support them with that. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. It's really good to know that we're working with the city on such an important issue, something that I think will be close to the minds of many of us. Certainly, I've had the experience of watching my son engage with online learning, sometimes very positively, sometimes quite frustratingly. I'm very struck by the idea that digital infrastructure is a public good. We take it for granted that the state will build our roads, and yet we don't assume that the state will provide internet infrastructure, and yet we're probably at a stage in human evolution where we have more need of digital infrastructure than we have need of roads. But anyway, that's my personal gripe gone. We're on to the Q&A section of the meeting. Bearing in mind that our advice for good well-being is that we should try to end Zoom minutes at 10 minutes to the hour rather than absolutely on the hour. A few more questions have come in. One question is about the use of Microsoft Teams. We are going to be rolling this out. I should say I had a meeting with the Vice-Chancellor this morning at 8 o'clock on Microsoft Teams, and I couldn't make it work. So we've obviously still got a bit of work to do on Microsoft Teams, but we do have a plan to roll that out. I believe the key is you have to have the Microsoft Authenticator, not the Google Authenticator. A few people are nodding, and they obviously knew that already, and I didn't. Somebody else has asked, what advice can we give on public transport and particularly car sharing? I think we don't yet have advice on this. I mean, obviously it will be helpful if people can try to travel on public transport out of the peak hours. And part of the point of doing the transport survey is to get a handle on which people in which parts of our organisation are likely to do what the level of demand to switch from public transport to cars is, what the implications are for car parking, and how many people are on campus at any time. And I don't think that we have any evidence on car sharing at the moment. I would note that people have continued to use Uber through the crisis, although of course Uber drivers are one of the groups in society that have been massively and disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Somebody's asked about printing. Once the buildings are open, obviously the printers will be available again, although we have in any case been trying to encourage people not to print if you don't need to. And hopefully these last few months have demonstrated to many of us how little we need to print if push comes to shove. Another good question on whether food outlets will be open, because this will help with the vibrant campus feel. It absolutely will. We are confident that Starbucks in the Muirhead Tower, and I think it's the Starbucks in University House, and I forget what the outlet is, but the one in the School of Education. These should all open fairly soon after we reopen the building, although probably not immediately. I suspect not before September the 11th. We may have a bit more difficulty in getting the facilities open in Park House and the Alan Walters building. But more generally, yes, the point is we really need to get the campus up and vibrant. Somebody has asked, how do we work this if we're going to work partly at work and partly at home, but we need work equipment? And I think that's a question where, if that is a specific issue for you, you need to talk to your line manager about what the best way is to arrange that. The answer might be work at home. The answer might be work at work. The answer might be change the equipment. The answer might possibly be buy some duplicate equipment, although we clearly want to try and avoid spending money that we do not absolutely have to spend in the context of a likely shortage of student fee income. Quite a lot of the costs, somebody says, of internet infrastructure is currently being borne by staff. How is this being recognised and recompensed by UOB? I mean, the problem here is multiple. Partly, many of us do already have that infrastructure, and it is really difficult to pick out who you would compensate on the basis of people who didn't have it before and people who did. It would be impossible in the current circumstances for UOB to pick up the bill for all of our digital infrastructure. And again, particularly in the context where we are facing a very likely scenario of being very short on income in the coming year. And there's a question about refunds of bus passes through the university payroll, which I don't know I'm not even sure that I understand what the question is. So the person who's asked that, I will get that picked up directly with you after the meeting. And somebody said, in open plan offices, which are often visited by people not based in them, academics coming in to see admins, etc., will this be stopped? I think we have to behave sensibly. The risk of transmission is raised when people are less than 2 meters away, and especially less than 1 meter away, and when they are together for an extended period of time. So the risk involved in somebody popping their head round your office door and asking you a question while still being 2 meters away is absolutely minimal. The risk involved in passing people on corridors, where in some cases we've had to make them two-way, and we've put one-way systems in where we can, but where they have to be two-way. The risks associated with passing people on corridors is quite small. We are encouraging people to wear face masks in buildings, and that will also help mitigate the risk. But I think we do have to treat each other as human beings. Human beings interact socially. We need to keep interacting socially, and that is one of the reasons why we want to get people back onto campus and not simply have an online operation. A very long question has just come in from Chloe, which I can't read and talk at the same time. So is there, Lorraine, Catherine, is there anything that you want to pick up where I've kind of said a question and answered it, because you can't actually see the questions, and you think that there's something else that you want to say? Well, I quickly read Chloe's question.
No, Richard, I think you've answered everything that I could possibly answer as well. The bus pass question I can't answer. We'll have to ask, I think it will be campus services probably that would have an answer, Monica. But I'm happy to follow up on any questions that we haven't answered. Hopefully they're being captured for us. I can't see them. So
Chloe's question is actually about the relative merits of working at home and working on campus. I think there's a different answer here for professional service teams and for academics. For professional service teams, one of the things that we will be doing is looking at the operation of each team and working out, is it sensible for this operation to continue to work wholly at home? If it is, and that's what people in that unit want to do, that is what we'll encourage. And then there will be some where the work that you do can only be done on campus. And in those circumstances, we will be looking at staggering entry, finding additional space for you to work in so that you're not all crammed into a shared office and so on. And then for some teams, what you will say is actually we want to be in some of the time, but not all of the time. So actually our senior education team is already back on campus, but they are back on campus 2 days a week. And that is working quite well to build team working where face-to-face really works. But also to have the flexibility that online brings us. For academics, it's slightly different, because whether you come on or not next term will really be determined by whether you have a face-to-face teaching session to deliver. If you're scheduled a face-to-face teaching session, the expectation will be that you come in to deliver it. However, one of the advantages of devolving the timetable to a local level is it should give us flexibility for people to negotiate swaps of classes, so that if people are allocated, for example, a face-to-face class at a time that will be difficult for them to do, they could consider changing it with somebody else who, for example, wouldn't have to travel on public transport or doesn't have childcare responsibilities. Because we've got these resilient teams, we'll also be able to work out so that the people who most need to shield or stay away from campus in the team are the ones who are allocated the online teaching, and the ones who are happy to come into campus are the ones who come into campus. Chloe has just said that's not her question, somebody else has asked it to her, but anyway, I hope that helps. We do need to call a halt here. Before I finally close the meeting, can I just say that our Wellbeing team, led by Dan Wheatley and Sophie Sinclair, have been working really hard during the pandemic as well to work out ways that we can all stay well and healthy. They have a proposal for another thing to do over the summer, which is a sponsored athletic challenge, if I've understood it correctly, in which the idea would be that a group of willing people would be working collectively to get exercise, and in the process of doing it, raise money for the Birmingham and Solihull Women's Aid. Sophie, I don't know if you are on the call and can unmute. It might be easiest. Oh, and this is also Wade, who has organised this. Let me see if I can get Wade to say something, because his name has come up. I can't unmute him.
Hi, Richard.
There we go. So Wade, do you want to briefly tell us what this is all about?
Yeah, sure. So I've been approached by Sophie. It's Birmingham Solihull and Women's Aid. They're a fantastic charity that do work helping women and children that have experienced domestic violence. which particularly during the pandemic has become quite topical. We know that it's increased in terms of the figures. So as they were celebrating 40 years of the charity, we thought it'd be nice if we did something around that, linking it with Wellbeing and getting people doing either 40 kilometres over a week of their choosing, or for those less able-bodied, because we want it to be more inclusive, if they could do maybe 40 minutes exercise per day. And this will all go on to Just Giving, and we aim to present to the charity early September. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. So I'd encourage people to participate in that. I believe some details will come around shortly by email. And can I also, without overly embarrassing Wade, just say thank you to Wade, who has been a brilliant PA for me over the course of the last year during a maternity cover period. Wade will be leaving the college, but not the university, at the end of the summer, but I really appreciate all of the support that you've given to me and indeed to the wider College Board team over the last year, Wade, so thank you very much. And on that point, I think I should end the meeting. I've spotted one or two other questions that have come in that I will try to respond to by email after the meeting. So thank you all very much, and we will end there.